All right, Joe, we'll get going. So we've got 62 attendees on, our 5 panelists. One of them will be joining in a little bit. My name is Eric Guzdek. I'm the secretary of New York State Amateur Hockey Association. I want to welcome everybody to the webinar in an attempt to clarify the player signing letter that went out. This will be the first of a few upcoming webinars that will be announced at a later date. The panelists that we have tonight are Joe Baudo, New York State Amateur Hockey President and District Director, Gary Lebrun, the Central Section President and also USA Hockey District Director, Dave Mensi, East Section President, Rusty Gallagher will be joining us in a minute, North Section President. Gary Joseph unfortunately could not be on with us tonight. And we also have Mark Chinitz, our legal counsel. We have several other board members present on the webinar. Joe Appolito, District Director and Player Development Coordinator. Mark Lamar, District Director and Tournament Director for New York State. John Ransom, the Treasurer for New York State Hockey. Ralph Scanapico, Past President and Safe Sport Coordinator. Mike Shapey, Referee in Chief for New York State Hockey. Tom Brandon, our District Registrar. Janice Cavaretta, West Section Registrar. Kim White, North Section Registrar. Sue Tessier, Central Section Registrar. Andy Tokaz, the newly appointed District Risk Manager. So I believe I covered everybody. If I missed, it wasn't intentional. It's kind of a lengthy list. We had sent you an email and we asked for everybody to send questions in advance. We compiled a list of questions for everybody. We're hoping that we can get to every question in the 1 hour time frame. There is a Q&A feature on the end of your screen. The chat has been disabled for everybody. So if you do have any questions that might come up during the presentation, you can send them to me if we can get to them, or if anybody wants clarification for anything, we can work it into the discussion. With that, I'm going to let Joe Baudo take it over, and then Gary Lebrun will be sharing his screen to flip through the PowerPoint presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Eric. I want to welcome everybody. As Eric said, this is a first-time venture for us. Hopefully, we'll do it more often and keep things going. So with regards to, Eric says we're going to do questions. With regards to questions that were sent in, we will respond to questions tonight if we get to all of them based on what we're here for, the signing of the players, based on a letter that was sent out on the 19th of May with my signature on it. If you had any other questions that were outside of this topic, we are planning on doing additional webinars, and we'll get to that towards the end of the PowerPoint. We've already got a couple scheduled, so we're going to try to keep this going to answer more questions for people. So, Gary, if you're ready. Okay, as we said, this is to cover these players signing due to what's gone on with COVID-19 and put us kind of on hold on everything we've been doing. So we're trying to open it up somewhat so associations can get started and get working with their teams and their organizations. So next one, Gary. Okay. Let's go down to number 3, Gary. That's all. Okay. If you've got the letter, we put some 4 stipulations in. The first one, just to review with everybody, is there's no cuts. Any player you sign during this period to a contract where the signs, that player cannot be cut in the future to make room for somebody else. It's one of our stipulations. We don't want you to sign a player at this time. And then once we do get opened up by the state to have tryouts and move along with tryouts, and you could fill your teams up or make any moves, things you want to do. We don't want you cutting a player that you already signed. It's been with you. He's going to be with you for the while, for the season. So next one. Okay, we also did with this, because of the conditions that are set forth by the state and the federal government, we put a refund period in there. In a lot of cases, you may be signing a player to a contract for this coming season, and they may have to withdraw due to financial hardship. A lot of people have lost their jobs over the last couple of months. I think the federal government the other day said there were like 36 million. And I might be wrong with that number too. But we want to give these people a chance by August 15th. If they cannot pay or don't have the money to do it, that they will receive a full refund from the association of any monies they've already paid to date after you sign them, with the exception cost of jerseys or equipment. That if you went out and bought jerseys for the team and the players got a jersey, they would not get a refund for that. And if the player does come and request a release under the conditions, that player will not be permitted to play for any other national or state-bound team or other travel team for the season, and only be able to play for in-house league programs for 2021. We don't want people using this as a basis to go out and search around, get themselves a team, and then all of a sudden somebody else comes along and says, we could use you and we want to get you on our team, and they use the financial obligation because they can't pay it because they don't have a job, and take their child to another tournament-bound program because they think it's stronger and better. We're trying to make this feasible for all organizations and all players and work together. The schedule doesn't provide permission for associations to hold on-ice tryouts or other events such as clinics, off-ice, on-ice, off-ice activities, which may be held in compliance with the directives of New York State and applicable local government authorities regarding the COVID-19 state of emergency by declaration. A lot of the reasons we're in the position we are is because we have to follow those emergency guidelines and go that way too. So everybody knows we will continue to address the events as they evolve. We'll notify you as membership whenever tryouts or other sanctioned events may be scheduled, subject to such activities being permitted by the state of New York and local government authorities. So we'll keep moving on. Okay, the key dates within the program in our letter, May 24th, it's the obligation list, as we've called it. Associations, once they got our letter, were required to, by the 24th of this month at 5 o'clock, to send the section vice presidents a list of all players that we called included on the obligation list, and they must be notified by the association. Their inclusion on the list by this date, using the association's best contact information for that player, preferably using most up-to-date email addresses for the player. The names of the players included on the obligation list that are timely submitted to the section president will be posted. They're not going to be posted on the website. We decided to change that. We didn't think after we did this that that's a great idea. So the list will be put together, and the section vice presidents will be in touch with the association presidents and receive a copy of a confidential list of people in their area that will be on this obligation list and cannot be signed to a contract on any one of the following dates that we have for signatures. And we go from there. In most cases, we've received, and I thank the association presidents, we've received a list from all four sections. happy that they did that in time and they got it back to us so we can keep moving along. Next important day to be May 30th, which is 4 days away. Anybody that's not on that list of having an obligation to their association that the section president has received and above will be deemed to be released pursuant to Rule 4A and 4B for the purpose of the commencement of the 2021 season. If a player on the obligation list satisfies the obligation with the association must immediately notify the section president of the player's removal from the list upon which the player will be immediately deemed to be released. This is a one-time deal that we're releasing everybody as a whole blanket release. We normally don't do this. You would be taking a release to your new association if you wanted to go to one. But in this case, because of the situations, we're going to do it that way. Okay. Starting June 1st and going through June 10th. Tier 1, Tier 2 national tournament bound, 14U, 15 only, 16U, 18U, and 19U girls teams only. Tier 3, state bound 14, 16, 18 teams only. No second teams. Beginning on the 1st at 9 a.m. and through the 10th at 5 o'clock. With respect to the association teams of players. And again, we list the players for Tier 1, youth and girls, Tier 2, youth and girls, Tier 3, youth, and 18U. With respect to the associations may sign these players for the teams, the player contracts, and it can either be a returning player or a player from another association for the 2021 season, unless that player, again, is on that obligation list posted on to the vice presidents and to the presidents. June 11th through June 30th, all associations, starting at 9 o'clock and continuing to June 30th at 5, including but not limited to Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, youth and girls, 8, 10, 12, whether tournament bound or not, may sign players to their contracts applicable to both the returning player and the player from another association for the 2021 season, unless the player, again, is on that obligation list. Associations must follow their section and league rules pertaining to player movement. Some sections have different rules that make it stronger and make it tougher to move. Those would still be enforced by those sections and those leagues. So July 1st, for lack of a better term, rosters are frozen. What we're looking here is this is not to freeze the rosters for USA Hockey. What we're doing here is by July 1st, we want a list of all the players that you have signed in the signing periods. So we have a list of those players. In case little Johnny comes back to us and say, I got cut. We'll have a list of that player that you signed back then. And this way we have a way to track down what's going on and notifying it. The rosters for USA Hockey will not be out till sometime in the middle of July and be done that way. And we will have a webinar coming up on that somewhere in that time frame so we can get those questions answered for you. After July, you can fill the rest of your spots. Hopefully, if tryouts can open up and we have ice going again in the state of New York. Again, by the 15th, the association has to send us that list in an Excel spreadsheet to the section president listing the teams and the players signed for the 2021 season. Okay, your contacts, if you don't already know, your section vice presidents are Gary Lebrun is the central section president. Dave Mensi is the east central president. Rusty Gallagher is the north section president. And Gary Joseph is the west section president. These are the people you make contact with those lists and give them to them so they've got them. Okay, as I said, again, in the future, we're already trying to plan on doing some webinars to keep going. Next Tuesday, and we will send out another invitation to everybody. We're going to do this coaching education program. Chuck Ridley, our coach in chief for New York State, will be hosting it. along with myself and maybe some people from USA Hockey, if we bring them in, to try to go through questions that you would have regarding coaching, what coaches have to do and what has to go on. On the 9th, we're going to be doing a webinar on Safe Sport program because there have been some questions on Safe Sport. If you have to do them, if you're or you don't have to do them. Ralph Scanapico, our Safe Sport coordinator, will be hosting that. We may also get in somebody from USA Hockey to help go through this with Ralph to try to make it easier for everybody to understand what's going on with Safe Sport for this coming year. And right now, we tentatively have planned a webinar hosted by Tom Brandon, New York District Registrar, to answer your questions on registration and coming in the future. That will probably be held somewhere in the first or second week of July, because the portal for registration probably won't be available until sometime in the middle of July. So we will keep that going, and we will try to add other webinars as we deem fit. I think we're going to look at as many as we can to try to keep everybody informed as to what's going on in New York State and what's happening with the situation as it is with the COVID-19, and go from there. So at this point, I'd like to open it up. I'm going to open it up and I'll start answering questions that we've already had and keep going on that way. Okay. First question, COVID, tryouts, practices, games, meetings, and gatherings. First question to that is, association should instruct staff to send home any player who exhibits signs of being sick. That I would say is a definite. If anybody's sick, you shouldn't really have them on the ice, whether you're worried about COVID-19 or any other flu or any other type of thing. I think if the players are sick, you should ask them to go home. The question is, would the association and its officers, coaches, be covered by USA Hockey insurance if the foregoing occurs? Mark Chinitz, our legal counsel, is here. And I know also somewhere on the webinar is Andy Tokaz, our risk manager. So Mark or Andy, either one of you guys want to jump in on this and try to answer it?
So the probability, but it has not yet been addressed formally, is that USA Hockey Insurance covers accidents. It does not necessarily cover illnesses. So if someone gets COVID-19, if someone gets the flu, it's handled ordinarily by your medical insurance. It's not covered by USA Hockey Insurance, which largely addresses accidents and that sort of a thing. But we have not yet had a formal determination of that by the insurance carriers and by the group of risk managers for USA Hockey. So the best thing you can do is essentially treat COVID similar to the way you would treat a kid showing up with the flu. You want them to go home and not give all the other kids the flu, and just follow the guidelines of the state of New York. Because the state of New York, to a great extent with COVID-19, is defining what the duty is for everyone. And the duty is safe distancing, wearing a mask, whether that mask can come off during games and all that would be addressed when amateur athletics is addressed, likely in phase 4 of the reopening. Andy, do you want to add something to that?
No, actually, Mark, you summed up the current situation and everything very well. In the next 2 weeks, when the annual Congress is going on, the risk managers, obviously it's an agenda item, but we'll have a little more formal reply and how the insurance policy will react. But you summed it up very well, Mark. Thank you.
So when we get more guidance on this exact question, we will let you all know. However, you can also see on the New York State Hockey website a rink reopening program, and it contains guidelines for how rinks should be reopened, for sanitizing things, and it also addresses to some extent what associations can do to keep players safe. follow the guidelines. If you want to hire someone to come in and check kids initially just to make sure that they're healthy, that's up to you. But if you follow the guidelines at this point, that's our best guidance that we can pass on to you.
Okay, I got, I don't know if you guys could see this because I got two follow-up questions. One is, what about the Coaches Association liability if someone contracts COVID? And the other one is, how about if a child gets sick and God forbid dies? Our organization's covered for the, I can't even make out that word, negligence lawsuits for saying that the team can go back to action. Gentlemen, I leave that to you two guys again.
Again, what the USA Hockey insurance principally covers is accidents. Now, whether that would be expanded for extreme circumstances, I don't know. We're going to be getting that. The insurance companies, I'm sure, want to address that with USA Hockey in any event, and we'll pass that on to you. But one way to think of COVID is that in terms of how it affects associations, it could be looked at very similar to the flu. The flu, when it gets really bad, can kill you. The flu can affect people severely, sometimes sends them to the hospital. The flu sometimes just passes through. So we don't have specific guidance on that yet. And the best thing you can do is follow the guidelines, because the guidelines are your friend. Generally speaking, when it comes to issues in law about negligence or whether you did anything bad, the standard would be the duty of care that you owe to the players. And the duty of care that you owe to the players has not significantly changed. If anything, we're getting more guidance from the state as to what you can and cannot do, what you should and should not do. The same with the rink opening procedure guidelines that are on the website that's issued from USA Hockey. And I would refer you to that. Beyond that, nothing tremendously has changed in terms of legal obligations, as far as I know. And we'll let you know what the insurance carrier plus the risk managers say to us, and we'll pass that on to you.
Do you believe New York State will have some sort of safe harbor for rink owners or organizations? I don't really have an answer for that one. I don't know if anybody else has an answer for that. Are you talking about New York State amateur hockey? You're talking about New York State itself? Because we're deemed, we can't do anything until New York State tells us it's okay to go back and do that stuff. So,
yeah, I'm not sure. I know what a safe harbor is in legal parlance. I'm not sure if we have any so-called safe harbors under the law or under the 1963 Sports Act. So the answer to that is that would have to be looked at, and I'm sure if there are safe harbors, a safe harbor legally is basically a statute that says under certain conditions, you're not liable for something else. And that would be something that the risk managers and the insurance companies would also discuss, because any safe harbor at law that's applicable to amateur sports, to hockey, would definitely be referenced in by the lawyers and the risk managers and the people who run liability risk for the insurance companies.
yeah, last question on that one was, it's New York State for New York State amateur hockey. I don't know what New York State's going to do once they reopen everything. We'll just take it one day at a time and see where we're going with it, and have to deal with what's handed us and try to work out the best we can. So.
Yeah, Joe, in terms of safe harbor, I think some people are thinking about that the federal government has been proposing legislation that would shield first responders, nurses, doctors, hospitals, all of those people from personal liability should someone die in a hospital or die in an ambulance, or the treatment is not in the plaintiff's opinion proper. I'm not aware of any New York State legislation to do that, and not with respect, at least with hockey, certainly, or amateur athletics. I'm not aware of anything at the federal level either for that. So if a safe harbor does pass federally, that affects us, or in the state, that affects us, that absolutely would be not only passed on to all the associations, but it would also be taken into account by the insurance carriers, because they would want to use those safe harbors as well.
Okay. Next question. They want us to clarify what tiers and age groups will be able to sign in accordance with the new player signing directive. I think that's very easily spelled out in the letter that we sent out to you. It lists the tiers and the ages and the teams. I think if you need it, if you don't have a copy of the letter can be found on our website to read it again, but we kind of spelled it out by age classifications and tiers. So I think that one was pretty well covered. Next is how do the parents make coaches aware of their interest? That's a very good question. I don't know how you would go about doing it. To do that, I don't know. You can call the coach, I guess. The coach will probably be contacting you if they're interested. We'll wait to see what happens. Okay, 2 more questions. Should the coaches sign enough kids by July 1st to have a viable roster? And when might tryouts be? You don't have to sign enough kids to have a viable roster. That's up to you. As far as when trials can take place, when we probably hit phase 4 in New York State, and the governor says we can do that and we can get the ice rinks back up and running, that's probably when we would do tryouts. That I can't give you a date till the governor tells us what's going on and what's happening. The second question, is there only one team per age group at 14? Under the first one, you're to sign your tournament-bound team at 14U. If you're going to have another team that's non-tournament bound, that would probably come under the July age classification, the July 11th date. But we state there it's the national tournament bound or state tournament bound teams that you can sign June 1st through June 10th. So I hope that answers the question for you. As I say, on this page, it shows you and it tells you no second team. So your second teams would have to be done in the July 11th period of time. Next one, can girls following the same rules as last season still dual roster? Yes, they can. Girls have been allowed to dual roster as long as only one team is tournament bound. And in most cases, if it's with a different organization, the presidents of both organizations agree to let the girl roster on both teams and do it that way. I want to ask actually Joe Appolito to get on right now because Joe wants to talk about the August 31st date for the girls to notify him with regards to national tournament bound status. Joe, are you there?
Hi, Joe. I am here. I had to unmute myself. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. So for those of you that don't know, for those of you that are on the call, and I'm really not sure exactly who is there, but what I'm going to talk about really applies to Tier 1 girls programs. So in the past, organizations, associations that were planning to host Tier 1 teams were supposed to declare their intention to do so prior to the start of the national championship. Well, obviously this year we didn't have a national championship. So as a result, that's been waived by New York State. However, if you look at our New York State guidebook, there are some other timelines that we have decided are going to fit within the framework of what we're doing in this plan. So if there are teams, associations that wish to host or consider being hosts for Tier 1 teams, nationally tournament bound, they would have until August 31st, according to our New York State guidebook, to be able to submit their intent to the section VPs in writing. So if there are association presidents out there, they would need to submit their intent to the section VPs by August 31st in order to be considered tier one. We've been given a number of teams that we can host at each of the 19, 16, and 14U level for the upcoming season. I believe our numbers are 4 teams at the 19U across the state, 6 teams at the 16U, and I'm pretty sure it's 8. I need to confirm that last number for 14. So in the event that we get more than 4 19U teams, for example, that submit their request to the section VPs by August 31st, if that occurs, then we would need to have a tiering tournament by November 30th, as outlined in our guidebook as well. And that would also apply for the 6 teams at 16U and the 8 teams at 14U. As of August 31st, we'll know exactly how many teams there are, and we'll be able to determine at that point if we'll need to have a tiering tournament or not.
Thanks, Joey.
Yep.
Okay, moving along. Question is, what's a player agreement or contract? I think in most cases, we have one in our guidebook if you want to use it. It's a commitment form. In a lot of cases, associations over the past have their own type of commitment form or agreement that you've had your players sign. Either one of them is fine. Either one of them is appropriate to use. Also, somebody want to know if the electronic signatures would be good. I see no reason with them and going from there. And, we're just looking at this forms and how to do them. Somebody wants to know if we can put a fillable form together for commitments. We can look into that. I'm not sure if we can get that done right away. I can't do that because I'm not that smart when it comes to doing stuff on a computer. That's why I'm sitting behind the screen. Documents, should they be signed by the coach and the parent? If you look at the commitment form that's used by New York State in our guide, it requires the parent, the coach, and the president of the organization to all to sign the commitment form at one time. So to make the commitment viable and good. I got another question, 2 questions. Are any New York State teams allowed to participate in tournaments outside of New York come July 1st with submitted rosters? I'll be very honest that I'm not sure, but I don't think USA Hockey is going to have rosters submitted by July 1st. And I don't know if we're still eligible because we're in kind of a shutdown because we don't, our stuff isn't being sanctioned because our state will not let us do anything with according to amateur sports. So whether or not we get up and running will be the question first. And whether or not USA Hockey will be doing the rosters at that time will be the next question. So I can't give you a definite answer on that one. But at this point, I'm not sure July 1st is going to be long enough before we can get everything done in place and taken care of. What is the importance of these timelines to sign players without actual on-ice tryouts within the month of June? Concerns are nobody knows what hockey is going to be for the entire year, and the association is required to commit players and sign them by July 1, or can we simply just wait and conduct tournament and not try out? We're giving you, by doing this, we're giving the associations the opportunity. We've had associations want to get started. It helps them get their ice commitments to their rinks put together so they know what they would need to get their ice going and running it that way. Other districts within our borders have gone to the same thing. They're letting their team sign. One of the questions came up, where they're taking our players by saying we can't do it. So we're trying to get in the same area with the other organizations so the teams and associations can get their players somewhat put together and start being able to make their ice contracts and whatever else they need to get their associations ready and going. If teams are buying ice in Pennsylvania, Ohio to practice, anybody that's from New York is not sanctioned to do anything until we say you're sanctioned to do it. So I would say you might have a problem with regards to taking your team to another state to say that you're playing over there because they've opened up. Unless we open up, we're not going to open up our sanctioning on any event, as it says at the beginning of the letter. It's not going to give you a right to do tryouts, on ice, off ice works, clinics. By trying to go to a different state, you may try to get away with it, but that may not be a sanctioned event. So you got to look at that a lot closer before you try to start doing something like that. Next question, is there going to be a state tournament? It's a very good question. At this time, I would say we're planning on a state tournament, but if something changes and God forbid we get a spike in this virus again come the winter, don't know what's going to happen after that. Right now, I know USA Hockey's planning on doing nationals. We're planning on doing our state tournaments. But I can't guarantee that. I can't foresee what's going to happen with the virus and how we get through that. But if we do, we are planning on trying to do that. Okay, one more. If we go through the signing period, end up with far too fewer players to make a viable team, would the kids be released without penalty if they want to go somewhere else? Would they be exempt from the house rule? At this point, I'm going to say no, because that's going to be up to the organizations to try to get their teams filled. And by viable, you mean, are they good enough to play? You're the one that's picking the players. So I think, we're trying to do this to be fair to everybody. We don't want somebody to pick a team of 5 players or 6 players and then decide to give them to the team next door because it'll make them a lot stronger. If you're going to do this, do it the right way. Let's be upfront about everything we're doing. If you're going to sign players that you're going to keep. Sign players you're going to make a team with or try to make a good team with. It's up to you, but we don't want people to start going around the back door and changing things. So at this point, is the plan still to do split season for 16 and 18 tournament bound teams? Same as normal season. Split season has always been a thing that leagues and associations and teams have done within their sections because they play high school. I don't know what type New York State Public High School is going to do. We have never stopped teams from playing full season. We've never forced teams to be split season. But, we're going to, we'll look at that. I think if your high schools don't play, your kids want to play full season, we don't stop that and we won't stop that. So, can players is interest in multiple organizations? I would say so, but once you sign them, they're not going anywhere else. So, okay, where are we next? Are teams allowed to privately rent ice and skate under? Okay, this is another one of those. Let's go around the system and we'll rent it under Joey Jones, and we'll do the ice and people can practice. Well, guess what? If little Johnny gets hurt in your ice, you're the one that's going to be the one that's going to get sued. You're the one that's going to be liable for that. You won't have insurance coverage from USA Hockey. So try not to skirt around the system and think you're going to do a better job by doing it that way. It's kind of crazy. So how can we plan a budget without USA Hockey implementing changes to the rinks and without tryouts? Well, first of all, USA Hockey isn't implementing any changes right now. We're trying to do this in order to get you started and get you going. We're under directions by the state of New York on what we can do at this time and what their directive is. It's not USA Hockey that's telling us we can't have tryouts, we can't do this stuff. The state of New York is telling us we can't at this point. So, how do you plan a budget after you know what's going on? You can plan a budget for 15 kids, 16 kids, or 18 kids. You know what it's going to cost you. That's the reason we started this. So you can basically go out and see what you've got and how much ice you're going to want and get a cost on your ice and everything else you would need, and then work on your budget. So next one. Is it possible the signing period will be extended, or will the state just It's going to stay just the 1 month. Hopefully, we're hoping hard that by the time we get into July, we will be back on the ice and you can finish your team with doing tryouts on the ice at that time. So, okay, I got 2 more, and then we're going to move on to the next one. Will rinks be required to follow guidelines on safety, not just guidelines? I would say they're going to have to follow whatever rules that New York State puts in place for them. And go from there. We've put out a thing from USA Hockey on getting the rinks open again, and that tells them how to move along and how to go with it. And they should be working on safety. So if our rink is doing private ice rentals, your suggestion is to, you know what? I can only advise you what I feel is right. If you're going to go do private ice rentals, and then, like I say, somebody gets hurt, you're going to come to USA Hockey in New York State and say, well, he got hurt at this thing. Well, it's not a sanctioned event. So, I mean, that's something you've got to deal with. You may not have that going. So, can organizations have a virtual board meeting? We're doing that run right now, so I see no reason why they can't do it. Okay, next. New York State schools keep closed in September. Will youth hockey also remain closed? I don't see why, if our rinks are open, that we'd have to stay closed. I don't know how it would affect any school sports, but that's up to them. I don't know what's going to happen with them, and I haven't heard from anybody that's going to be able to tell me what's going to happen with them. So at this point, when schools are closed during the break time at Christmas, we still have skating going on, don't we? So that's another one. If things get that bad, then we might have to look at it again.
Hey, Joe, I know that we're starting to get into a lot of questions that aren't
Yes.
specifically related to the player signing and clarification. And I know that you're only about halfway through your list of questions that people took the time to pre-send in.
Some of the questions have already been answered on what they've had before.
But I just wanted to try and keep us on track. And a lot of these questions are great questions that people brought up that we could take a look at, the returning to the rinks guide that the U.S. Ice Rinks Association and USA Hockey and U.S. Figure Skating produced, and guidelines for how we return to the rink. So we could even have another Zoom call regarding that for future meetings.
All right. Okay.
Joe,
Yes, sir.
Harry Lebrun. There's someone sent a question into the chat segment of our, I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't. As far as the commitment forms, we just want a list of the players that you signed. You don't have to send us their commitment forms. You keep those. Recommend you give a copy to the parents so they've got it for their records, but you don't have to send that to us. We just want a list, an Excel spreadsheet of the players that you signed to your 14U team, 15 only team, or whatever team you signed them to. The one question that's left up on front, are there any discussions with Ontario and playing in Canada? At this point, we have none. I don't know what USA Hockey's doing. The biggest issue there is, will the U.S. and Canada open up the border to each other again? The last I heard, if you were going to play a game in Canada, you had to be there for 14-day quarantine before you got to play one game. And if you left, you had to go into quarantine again. So I don't know where that's going to go. That's a good question for USA Hockey, and we can bring that to them because I don't know what they've done with regards to that. So, okay. All right. Let me see what I got here.
I think that pretty much covered the list, Joe.
Well, it's close to covering it, yeah. Again, when can a team practice start if your section is completely open? That's going to be by the rules in the area you live in. I mean, we got to look and see if the rinks are open, when they're going to go. Hopefully, and I'm just going to throw a date out there, which doesn't mean anything. If the governor says that on July 15th, that you can open up for amateur sports and ice hockey is one of them, we might turn around and say you got to wait till July 8th, which would give all the rinks a chance to get set up and get running if they've already haven't done it at that time. So if we can stay consistent throughout the state, we'll try to do that. I can't guarantee that because depending on what happens in other areas of the state and when they can open up and when they can't open up. Okay. There was a question if exceptions be made for deadlines for players and coaches doing safe sport or other requirements. I don't think so, because most of those can be done during the summer when they're out, when they're open, and there wouldn't be a reason not to do them. As it is, safe sport is not a. I don't think you try to pay for safe sport, but we can get that better from Ralph when we do our webinar on safe sport, and he might have a better answer for that at that time. I think I explained the roster frozen, what we're looking for. Okay.
Joe, we just had a question come up. Can 12U and 10U coaches begin talking to prospective players on June 1st, or does communication have to wait until June 11?
I'm probably willing to guarantee my paycheck that people on the June 1st date for signing have already talked to players. And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm a liar, but I assume that's already started. You probably could if you want to talk to them. You can't sign them till that date. I mean, parents, I'm sure, are going to call and ask if my kid, you're interested in my kid. So believe me, folks, this is the first time for us, let alone for you. So. Okay, one of the bigger questions, out of district player signings. Is a physical release necessary? And are there limitations on the number of players? Our rules state that if a player comes from another district to New York, he's supposed to have a release with him to show that he has no financial obligation or equipment obligation to the association or district where he left. I strongly recommend if you got a player coming in from Atlantic, Connecticut, Mass, Vermont, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that you make sure the player doesn't have a financial obligation at that point. Because just as I would do with my counterparts in the other districts, it's very easy to send them an email saying, Johnny Jones left our district with owing us money. And one thing I could tell you about the presidents in the other districts, we stick together when it comes to trying to get the money back for our organizations and work on it that way. So I would do that. Make sure that they have a physical release. And as far as limitations, I think we've never had a limitation on how many players you can get from another district on your team. Again, that's New York State. If your league or your section has a player movement rule on how many players you can take, that rule would be tougher than ours, and that rule would take precedent. So you'd have to look at what's going on with that. So, okay. There's no minimum or maximum players you need to, well, is there a minimum or maximum players on your roster? Yeah, there is. The most you can do is 18 skaters and 2 goaltenders. You can do 10 skaters and 10 goaltenders, but you're only allowed to have 18 skaters. So the maximum is 18. You need at least 11 to have a team to play on the ice. So those are to be the maximum and minimums. A lot of teams go with 15 players. So, you know, it's up to you as association or coach how you want to do it. So, okay. That's basically what I have. We covered almost all the questions based on questions that were asked as we're going along live.
And I think we've cleared all the questions in the Q&A. So
I hope this has helped everybody. Like, again, we're trying to do this to bring more information to you. Next week, we'll do a coaching one. On the 9th, we'll do a safe sport. But all the association presidents will be notified again as the next ones come up. We'll do a registration in the near future. So we'll go from there. And I hope this was worthwhile to you. I mean, if you think it's a great idea or a good idea or a bad idea, send me an email just so I know where we're going with it. And just so we keep it, I'd like to keep it going. I know my VPs and the other members on the board want to keep it going because it kind of helps us get information out to everybody on what's going on, especially in the situation we're in now with COVID-19. So again, I thank you all. Just got a note from my RIC. There won't be a referees webinar until after the annual Congress on the 13th. So plan on that one. That's going to be a fun one. You could yell at all the officials. So, but again, thank you. Thank you very much. And we look forward to doing this again next week. And please, the biggest thing that I want to ask in the future, and I know everybody getting into it for the first time by asking questions, if you can think about the questions you want when the invitation comes out, it's a lot easier to try to, in cases, get my people like Mark and Andy to have the answers for those questions that I don't have and have those ready to answer and go along as we're doing the questions. So, but again, thank you all. Have a great night. Hopefully our season can get off sooner than later, and we'll have a great season coming up before us. So again, thank you very much and have a good night.